So anyway, helping us navigate the WEF's fourth industrial revolution, the Fourth Reich matrix, it's Irish Republican Labour activist Martin Summers. And also, I think you're going to have to pronounce your surname, Matt.
O Branain.
Oh, that's easy enough. O Branain. That's Irish descent, is it?
Correct, yeah.
So, look, we're going to be going through all sorts of things this week, not least of which is this incredible announcement yesterday at the NATO summit by Keir Starmer that the Ukrainians were going to be able to use British long-range missiles to hit Russia, and then instantly countermanded by the Ministry of Defence in the Daily Telegraph saying, no, they won't. So quite who's in charge, who knows. Anyway, Matt, lovely to have you in here. I came across you because you popped up on one of our what we call the Bristol Media Collective, Bristol MC, talking about Assange. Basically, you were jubilant about it all, which all of us were, but you actually were involved during the Assange campaign. I think this is the theme of this programme, is we're not just sort of forgetting the Assange story. We're now looking back at people who were involved down the line through the campaign. And really, I suppose part of that celebration is reflecting on the successes. And one of those you were very much involved with, well, several.
Yeah, I've been campaigning for 5 years on it. It has been a big relief in a lot of ways. I mean, the fact that the guy's out, he's enjoying Australia and swimming and privacy and being with his lovely family. But while there's celebration and euphoria, there was also concern about the guilty plea and what does that mean? What did he plead guilty to exactly? And I think we should talk about that too. But so it's sort of it's not a perfect victory, but I think it's a historic win. I think it's a great win that'll echo through the ages. Yeah.
Okay. So you're a Kiwi. What are you doing over in the UK here?
Well, it was Julian's case that brought me over here actually. While I was born here, in fact, I haven't been back here since I was 5, which was a minute ago, and it was very bizarre to be flying back home, what I thought, was once home, after 35 years or so, to be coming back and see, why am I coming back? Because there's a freaking award-winning journalist in a maximum security prison. That was the last thing I thought. They would bring me back to the United Kingdom, but there we are. That's why I'm here, and yeah. Who knows from here?
Also, you and I met up with Amy Fallon and some other campaigners during the week in London, and it was a great atmosphere. Actually, everyone in sort of, but you want to be with your friends and to celebrate such a great victory. You got involved in this thing called the human chain, didn't you? Down the line, there were various, I think, things which caught everyone's eye, or anyone the mainstream press would allow their eye to be caught. It was caught. You know what I mean? There was. I suppose it's political theatre, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That was an idea that I tweeted and got, and it took fire. It went viral, you could say. And I was kind of blown away by that. And then Julian's wife retweeted it. I'd sort of taken a Google Earth capture. That's military technology. It's kind of funny to use it against them. And I retweeted that and put, hey, let's do a chain of 1,100 people around Belmarsh prison to free Assange. And that went viral. And it ended up turning into around the Parliament because it was a little easier. There was some complications around the prison.
What was the problem with the prison? Is it too big?
Well, it was that there was private ground, so they would have been able to kick us off it. So that was something I wasn't quite aware of. It was a little unclear from the satellite. So once we found that out, it was John Rees that took over and then put it around the Parliament, and they did a great job of promoting it. And we did. It ended up as 8 to 10,000 people. It was a marvelous day. Sun was shining. I just arrived from New Zealand, and it was without much sleep, but it was on a long flight. But it was one of the greatest days of my life. Yeah, it was just a wonderful feeling of solidarity. All these people holding hands, just as a sign of beautiful solidarity.
Fantastic.
Freedom.
I mean, and also you see, of course, the idea of the military is that he's an enemy of this country. Well, in a way, it's a bit like the Palestinian cause. The actual popular feeling in the UK is for the side of right and good, not for what the government is trying to push. But also, there is something bizarre about Belmarsh, and I understand why you focused on that with the original idea.
Yeah.
That somehow Julian is some kind of horrendous risk of some kind. I mean, he's not. He's a journalist, and yet he's put in this maximum security jail with all those restrictions that go with it. So, first of all, what were the restrictions? And secondly, why do you think he was in there?
Yeah, exactly. Well, firstly, I want to say, exactly well said. Is he an enemy of the United States and democracy, or is he a hero? I think most people who've actually looked into the case recognize that what he did was journalism, telling the truth, freedom of speech, democracy in its highest form. If that's not what the United States stands for, then what do they stand for? To me, he is an American hero. He has talked about, he's Australian, of course, but in terms of the values that the United States professes to be built upon, he is a hero for that, and he's said that he loves the United States Constitution above all, and he was trying to enforce the First Amendment around the world. So I think he is a hero in that sense. What did he do? Yeah, he revealed the truth. He revealed, so the people had an idea of what their government, which they elect to represent them, was actually doing with their taxes. And if that's, what it's all about, that's what it's all about, isn't it? So, and as far as the restrictions, they were brutal. Belmarsh, we've got our Irish Labour campaigner here. Apparently, Belmarsh was built to house the IRA, and it is the most brutal prison and secure prison in the United Kingdom. And why the heck was he there? He wasn't even serving a sentence. He's a non-violent prisoner. The question was answered when the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture visited him with top forensic psychologists, and they determined that he was being tortured, originally in solitary confinement 24 hours of the day. The prisoners, who are a lot of them serial murderers and terrorists, actually protested themselves, writing a letter to the governor of the prison to get him out of solitary confinement.
What were they saying, that this guy isn't a maniac like us? Or what were they saying?
I don't know. I'd love to see.
We only want maniacs in here.
Yeah, that's right. If you're doing something right, if you've got murderers and terrorists sort of feeling sorry for you and taking a stand of solidarity to look after you.
Seriously, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really moving, and that's what it takes, and that's how we got him out in the end. It was solidarity and the movement of the people from the grassroots up that's freed him, and I think it's a great lesson for all time, that anyone says to you, there's nothing you can do. You get that cynicism all the time, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, this to me is the perfect example. There are others in history, but this is going to go down in history as one of those examples of, well, you know what? They wanted this guy bad, and we got him out.
We were talking to John a few months ago, even in it was quite a harrowing interview, because there were suggestions that Julian might die in there.
Oh, for sure. It was a constant anxiety for anyone that was campaigning and was keeping their eyes on it, right? And I've spoken to activists that have felt this relief that, now we don't live day to day with that background radiation, the anxiety that is Julian going to die in this prison, and what will that mean for our democracies? So we've avoided the very worst, and so he is free, and now it's time for him to cover, but he has pled guilty to journalism, and that's a worry.
Well, it is and it isn't. I remember Jen Robinson, his barrister, when he was released, saying, actually, this is a fairly minor court, so the idea that this can be used isn't necessary. It's certainly not cast in stone. Yep. But can you just give us your take, Max? I know you were following this really closely. And I think there was something in the New York Times at the end of the week he was released, which was talking about how it happened and why. Because the United States, it looked as if there was signals within the United States that they may actually lose the case in British courts or in the European courts, and that would have set another precedent, which would have been even more embarrassing. So, Tony, what's your take on how it came to Julian's release?
Yeah, that's right. It's a good question, and just first of all, on your point about what Jen Robinson said, and she said some great things about it, and it is true that it's not a tight or a higher court legal precedent. However, just the fact that they have applied it and forced him rather than backing down and just dropping the charges, it's still a precedent of sorts, and that they've gone after him all this time and forced him to be imprisoned for 14 years in total. It's still a terrifying precedent in that sense. And it won't be solved until they change the law now, that essentially it's the Espionage Act. They promised when they wrote it, there were constitutional experts at the time, back in 1912, that objected to the way it was written. It was supposed to go after spies, but they were like, hang on, the wording of this means you might be able to go after a publisher or a journalist for revealing state crimes. They were, no, we'll never use it in that fashion, don't worry. Ooh. They kept that promise for 98 years until they prosecuted Julian and with it. So that's the danger, and that's what we can't lose sight of. In fact, this isn't really over until that is burnt, or, that's the way I like to phrase it. We could try to reform it, but we need to look into that. It doesn't allow public interest defense, which is the only defense you could have as a journalist or a publisher for publishing anything classified, which is something journalists do daily, I understand, so it's, so that's the danger. As far as how did we free him? And it was, I believe it was grassroots up. People say, oh, they'll never, but yeah, they won't unless we make them.
Well, the fact wasn't it, that there were lawyers within the US State Department who were saying, hang on, guys, looks like we might going to be losing this
yeah,
case.
That's right. So there was that. It did seem that Craig Murray said it very well, that they had seemed to box themselves into a logical corner they couldn't escape. There was many grounds of the appeal which he should have been allowed to have heard or won on, but the one that they allowed that they didn't seem to be able to get out of was that they had clearly said that he, as an Australian, this is the profound hypocrisy of it, was that they wanted to punish him and try him on a US law, even though he's an Australian. However, they weren't prepared to give him the protection of the United States law of the First Amendment. I mean, on one hand giveth, one hand take away. What? And that's what it was going to hinge on. It did seem that, he wasn't going to be able to use the First Amendment to defend himself because he was an Australian.
So this is basic free speech.
Yeah, it is.
Freedom of speech, all around freedom of speech, yeah.
So it looked like they were going to lose on that. And I spoke to Craig Murray on this the week before the plea and after, and because he's very on the inside there, very close to the family and
he was a former diplomat who was giving them advice, wasn't he, about right, well, this might be an opportunity, this might not. Yeah,
and so he was sort of talking to me about the plea deal. I didn't know that it was in the air at the time, but it was. He was asking me my thoughts on it, and I was, which were a few, but I think he made the right choice to get out. But I think that what it came down to, and I asked Craig this, I was like, did he do this? We had a strong feeling that he would win and get this and actually succeed, block the appeal finally. But why did he do this? And I asked him, was it because of the small chance that he lost? And they put him straight on a CIA plane to spend his rest of his life in solitary confinement. And he said, yes, that's it. It's like, was it a 5% chance? Yes, but would it mean that he would be in the torturous hell of 24 hours solitary? That's what people have to get their heads around. It's a horrific state, and it's fate worse than death. And that is why. So it was under duress. That shows to me that it was under duress that he did this. So that's another part of it.
Well, an out-of-court settlement of some sort is always going to be better than just going to court with the possibility that might be the end, and you may be going down, and you may not even get these basic First Amendment rights. Anyway, Martin, this is it's been quite important for journalism generally. But don't you think, in a way, the Americans are now going to be looking for the next Julian Assange? There's going to be someone else that the Russians have got Alan Dershowitz, I think is in his name, or Aaron Dershowitz, and this is starting to become. The idea here is that the military on both sides and all sides are trying to get people who are blowing the whistle in jail so they can't publish.
Well, if you think about it, he has been horrendously publicly punished. And lots of people who are going into journalism as young people will get the message, won't they? They'll realise, well, there's certain things we're not going to do, and that's why they've done it. The Espionage Act, in fact, was used to put...
Daniel Ellsberg?
No, Daniel Ellsberg was never prosecuted on the Espionage Act because they couldn't...
They almost did.
They almost did, but then they realised they couldn't do it. But back in the day, in the First World War...
Itching to do it.
In the First World War, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. He was the leader of the Socialist Party in the US. The name's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. But he was put in prison under the Espionage Act for opposing the First World War. And eventually he was released. And of course the Espionage Act in the 1960s, it only used to apply to American citizens in the US, and it was used in a repressive way against the Wobblies and people like that.
Who are the Wobblies?
The Wobblies were the industrial workers of the world, the sort of anarchist trade union, which were quite influential in the US in the early part of the 19th century. So this was all directed at them.
Funded by the communists, were they?
No, they're totally independent of that. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of the senator that was sent down, because it'll come to me in a minute, but anyway, people can look this up. I mean, that's what the internet's for. So it was used, and then in the 60s, they then extended the Espionage Act to the whole planet. So you could be charged with espionage against the United States in any country, and any individual can be charged under it, which, if you think about it, is an extraordinary thing for a country to do, to say we can charge anybody from any country with espionage against us. Look, at the end of the day, Assange is an Australian citizen.
Yeah.
How can he be charged with espionage against the United States when he's not even
Britain, while he's in Britain?
Well, I mean, this is what's wrong with the whole thing. And of course, by pleading guilty in the Marianas, that just keeps that whole thing going. That they can, in theory, arrest anybody anywhere and charge them with espionage against the United States.
Yeah,
but of course, what it does do is the whole world watching this and how hypocritical and rubbish it all is, and it's part of them losing global power. It's another brick falling out of that wall, isn't it? And of course. Obviously they find it very difficult to lecture Putin about locking up political prisoners while Assange is still in Belmarsh.
Oh, totally.
It's like, shut up, what are you on about?
Undermines their moral authority, doesn't it?
Do you want to say, Matt, give us a couple of ideas of specific leaks that Julian was involved in? I mean, I think everyone knows the Iraq War diaries, which was the killing of the Reuters journalist, the cameraman, where these American guys in a helicopter were saying, hey, guy's got a gun. No, it's a camera. Yeah.
That's right.
So, are there any particular leaks that you think were, struck you as significant?
Yeah, I will. And can I just go on what something Mr. Labour Irish said about scaring young journalists? He's got a real name. Martin, scaring young journalists coming into the field. Now, I was planning a birthday celebration for Julian's 50th, which he was going to spend in solitary confinement back when I was in Auckland, New Zealand. I went along to like a big warehouse to buy a bunch of stuff, to get some balloons. And at the counter, I said, I bought some 50th balloons, and I was like, these are with helium. These are for Julian Assange, I said. And then the lady, this young girl at the back, her ears pricked up. She came over and said, are these for Julian Assange? And I said, yeah.
So where were you doing this?
This was in Auckland, New Zealand.
Back
in New Zealand. And I said, yeah, they are. And how do you know about Julian Assange? She's probably looking about 19 or something like that. I was like, curious. And she said, well, I was going to study journalism, and then I found out what they've done to Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and I changed my mind.
Well, actually, Snowden got away, didn't he?
Well, yeah, well, that's right. He's away, but if he sits back foot
so
in
she's
the United
saying
States,
basically, well, I suppose, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? You're going to have to get out of New Zealand or Australia or the Empire if you want to be a journalist.
And that says it all to me. I mean, we can't have someone like her. And I remember telling that to Nicky Haga, who's a great New Zealand investigative journalist who worked with Julian.
Him,
yeah. And he said, that's terrible. If she was, if she said that means she was going to be a good one.
Yeah, she's our future.
Yeah. If she's following Assange and Snowden.
So they've been pressing her buttons, Martin.
So it's already having an impact, which is horrific.
Anyway.
And then back to, your question about the leaks. I mean, gosh, there's so many. I mean, as the lawyers said, I got to monitor one of the trials and heard Julian's lawyers put to the court that these represented the largest revelations of U.S. state criminal behavior in U.S. history. So there was a lot. But of course it wasn't only the United States. He revealed corruption around the world, Russia, everywhere, some of the leaks inspired the Arab Spring, and but there was more material on the United States. Some people criticized him for that, but the fact is just that he got more. He wasn't selectively persecuting the US. It's just that Chelsea Manning happened to she's the military analyst that leaked to WikiLeaks. That's key to note. He never hacked or stole anything. She leaked it to him willingly. After the New York Times, was said that it was too hot for them, the Washington Post, too hot for us. Julian was willing to do it, and then he got all those papers together, the New York Times, the Guardian, the other papers, El País, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, from around the world, the 5 biggest papers around the world. And that was another novel thing that Julian was able to do, was to get these big news organizations to work together. But he was kind of the fall guy, willing to publish it first, and he ended up taking the fall. But yeah, for award-winning journalism. Now, what was it? Yeah, as you say, the collateral murder video. A lot of people have seen the Apache helicopter gunning down a bunch of civilians and 2 Reuters employees, and then the father that came to try to rescue them. And they were firing on unarmed people that were crawling around on the ground, and then someone that came in just in a civilian car with a couple of children in the back to rescue them. And they opened fire with these anti tank Hellfire missiles right onto these civilians. So it's horrific. And you look into the lives of these people, and it's really, there's interviews with them, it's really moving. Once you get down to that human level, it's just one grain of sand in a million, different stories that Julian revealed. There were many, the Guantanamo Bay torture. There was also environmental corruption, the diplomatic cables. These are the ones that he was specifically prosecuted for. The one that really stood out to me was there was a diplomatic cable, which revealed an incident where US troops went into a home in Iraq and handcuffed a family. There was 2 children under the age of 5 and a grandmother. They were shot execution style on the back of the head. Then a bombing raid was called in to kind of clear the evidence of this war crime. But this diplomatic cable which spoke about it was released by WikiLeaks. That got into the hands of the Iraqi government, which is the one that the US installed, like their puppet government. But they were so shocked by this, they were like, listen, we're going to have to start reporting these war crimes. This is, you can even find it, it's actually published by CNN. 2 weeks later, referring directly to WikiLeaks, the Iraqi government, and then 2 weeks later, Obama announces the withdrawal of US troops, citing that negotiation, citing the WikiLeaks cable. So here we have a journalist in jail being prosecuted for publishing evidence of war crimes that ended an illegal invasion that killed millions of people, setting a legal precedent that that's a crime. Like, if that doesn't make your blood boil and, like a sense of injustice, like, we cannot have that happening and pretend that we can ever have a world of peace. I
suppose in a way it's a sort of tug of war, all this, between the idea of the rule of law, that the war crimes actually do mean something, or else it's just the law of the jungle, Matt, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what war means often? I noticed this week, by the way, and I really actually love this Plus 972 magazine, the Israeli magazine, which also has a Hebrew language version. And we had their editor on a couple of months ago, I think, explaining how every article the Israeli military have to look at and allow or disallow that goes through their editorial board, a panel, before it gets, and he gave an idea of the proportion of the articles. Anyway, this one did get through, I suppose because they can't deny it. Anyway, the article's headline is "I'm bored, so I shoot." The Israeli army's approval of the free-for-all violence in Gaza. Israeli soldiers described the near total absence of firing regulations in the Gaza war, with troops shooting as they please, setting homes ablaze and leaving corpses on the streets, with their commanders position. In early June, Al Jazeera aired a series of disturbing videos revealing what it described as summary executions. Israeli soldiers shooting dead several Palestinians walking near the coastal road in the Gaza Strip on 3 separate occasions. In each case, the Palestinians appeared unarmed, did not pose any imminent threat to the soldiers. Such footage is rare due to the severe constraints faced by journalists in the besieged enclave and constant danger to their lives. In fact, deliberate targeting, folks. Something like 180 journalists killed there, even though it's very difficult to verify all of them, because the Israelis make sure it's very difficult to verify by killing the journalists and anyone that goes in being killed too, to try and find out what's going on. In the besieged enclave, the constant danger to their lives. But these executions, which did not appear to have any security rationale, are consistent with the testimonials of 6 Israeli soldiers who spoke to Plus 972 magazine and Local Call following their release from active duty in Gaza in recent months, collaborating the testimonials of Palestinian eyewitnesses and doctors throughout the war. The soldiers described being authorised to open fire, Martin, on Palestinians at will, including civilians.
Yeah, I read all about that this week. Obviously, I'm following these things quite closely.
So there is no rule of law here, is there? If you can just murder civilians, then that's a war crime. So the war crimes are hardwired into the Israeli officers' corps.
Yeah, I'm just to remark, to say to the listeners, I've remembered who the US Senator was. Eugene Debs. He was the one who was put in prison, and of course he was a leader of the Socialist Party.
But let's not lose this point.
No. I think what's happening is clear. That the Russians are being accused of war crimes at Bucha and so on in the Ukraine. To my mind, reading what happened at Bucha, that was actually carried out by the Ukrainian forces. And they do this, you see. NATO intelligence services and special forces carry out false flag attacks where they try and put the blame on others.
But the point here is there is this tug of war between the law of the jungle and the rule of law.
Well, that's why the Chinese and the Russians are now they're going to be sticklers for UN rules about everything, because it's the rules-based order is the non-rules-based order. That's why they call it the rules-based order, because it's not based on any legal basis. And of course, Putin is a lawyer, and they're very well aware of what they've got to do to remain on the right side of international law, which is why, of course, they didn't arrange them for Bucha, because they probably know that they did it. And it was done just at the moment when Boris Johnson turned up in Kyiv to tell them to fight on, even though they got a peace deal on the table. Zelensky had signed up for it. It was mediated by the Israelis and the Turks. It was all agreed what was going to happen, and then the British sabotaged it. And of course, part of that British sabotage was to have a load of pictures in the media of all these people who've been murdered by the terrible Russian soldiers. Because the Russian soldiers had retreated from Kiev as part of the agreement. That's why they're gone. That's why they never wanted to take Kiev in the first place. And part of the agreement they'd made with the Zelensky was that we will withdraw. So they withdrew. And then, of course, 3 days later, suddenly we find all these dead bodies around the place. Just stinks, really. And of course, they did it. Like they carried out the Maidan massacre as well, because there was a court case in Kiev in 2017 where the riot police, the Berkut riot police, had been put on trial for shooting the demonstrators, and of course they walked because they had testimony on video from 2 of the shooters who were actually from Georgia. And they were brought in from Georgia under the command of a US officer called Christopher Boyenga, and they shot both police officers and demonstrators, and it was carried out by NATO. And of course, I talked about this on Russia Today when it happened. It was all over the news in Russia. But of course, people in the West simply do not know that court case took place, or what the implications of it were. So
who's going to win this tug of war? This is the question, isn't it? Because surely those who are prepared to tear up the rule books have an advantage, don't they? They can go and find the leader of the people who want to, even if it's to do with the International Criminal Court. These lawyers were being threatened. The judges were being threatened.
So, John Bolton told the International Criminal Court's lawyers, "We know where your kids live." That's who they are, and that's what they like.
But surely, if someone is prepared to do things like that, then they're going to beat the other people. Surely.
No, because look at what's happening in Gaza. They've killed loads and loads of civilians, but the guys are still in the tunnels, and they don't know how to get them out. It's like Stalingrad. So they can kill all the civilians they want. From a military point of view, they're losing.
Yeah, I think the problem is you lose your moral authority eventually. There is a limit, you know. I think US power. I even met General Petraeus, who led the invasion of Iraq. Yeah, this was unbelievable. My friend invites me to a festival of music and philosophy, and I was like, oh, okay, a cheap ticket. I'll have a look at the lineup. The first
Is this over in New Zealand or here?
No, this was here just about a month ago.
Right.
And I looked at the lineup. I'll see if I'll check it out if it's interesting. The first name I saw, General Petraeus, former head of the CIA, and the general who invaded, in charge of Iraq and Afghanistan
as well. Yeah.
I was like, right, I might go actually. I might have a question for him or two. And so I did, and I actually got to get backstage because my friend had an artist pass, and I was there. There he was, hanging out in this tent, and there I was. And so I got to go up to him and ask him. And my question to him, I had to think about this. I was like, all right, I know. What I'm going to ask him is the United States safer for jailing and prosecuting Assange, you know, for revealing war crimes and what have you, or is the US power and security really based upon the global idea that they are standing for democracy and the rule of law? And
that's quite a long question. It's not as long as the one Martin asked to Nick Clegg, which went on for about 10 minutes. But anyway,
yeah, but that I got him thinking, and to me that it is their real power is based on the idea.
So what did he say? Or did he respond at all? Or
he didn't. What did he say? He didn't directly answer that. He sort of resisted the idea that Julian, all he did was journalism. But I encouraged him to look closer, because all the experts agree that it was. And in fact, if you look at the guilty plea, that's all he pled to, was receiving and publishing.
I know what the listeners are thinking. Hey, maybe it was Matt that did it.
That did what?
That got pricks the conscience of one of the top people.
For a minute, we wondered, because he actually looked at I was wearing a Guantanamo Bay prisoner suit and Free Assange sign for the last 2 years until he was freed. I made that promise. So he looked at my sign before I had this chat to him as he was walking off, and tapped his fist on his heart and put his fist up. I was like, what the heck is just happened?
Wow.
And my friend who was with me, a journalist, our minds were blowing, and we were starting to envision headlines in the Los Angeles Times, New York Times, like Petraeus, you know, wants to free Assange, you know, and we were going to get a statement from him. Why did you do that? Turns out, I've got these dog tags here that this American activist made for the Free Assange Army. Halo Benson made these beautiful dog tags and sent them out to a bunch of activists around the world. That is what he was looking at. I didn't realize, and that's what he was excited. He thought I was, a soldier.
So you tricked him into thinking you was a soldier. You pricked all his conscience, and then he let Assange go.
Well, it was a good opening at least, and
well, this is important, isn't it? To take these hate figures and to actually to engage with them on a human level, because obviously what they're doing is on a totally inhuman level. The idea is yet they're othering masses and masses of people, whether it's Russia or whether it's Gaza being othered. Like, this is nothing to do with us. These are Untermensch, and we're just going to have to wipe them out. You're not engaging. You're not talking. You're just hating.
Yes, that's well said. To me, you can't fight fire with fire. Yeah. And this has been a real theme of the campaign for me, is that are we going to do what they do back to them? Are we going to label people like Petraeus as simply inhuman war pigs, simply evil? To me, that's no different to the fundamental philosophy they are using to other and to destroy and to tear down. Now, I get why people do that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I totally understand. It is inhumane and horrific, the things they are doing. But if you follow, I love Marsha Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and other approaches to non-judgment. If you look at what the base intention is, it's usually something universal and fundamental. It's for someone like Petraeus, he believes that the US must be secure and look after the citizens of the US, and that they are the leading light of democracy and all the rest of it. He believes, rightly or wrongly, and of course, that's the case, and that in order to do that, I would certainly argue wrongly, they have to kill a whole bunch of Arabs and steal the oil, and they can lie and cheat and murder as many people as they like to achieve that goal of protecting the safety and security of the United States. But that's not an evil intention. It's just a very, very, I mean, you might say evil, certainly extremely harmful way to achieve that goal, right?
I think this is one of the reasons everyone is concerned about the US presidential election, is because they have this. They seem to. All we care about is what is their foreign policy going to be, these guys. I mean, they're not really focused on their domestic people and making life better for Americans. They seem to be now, and you were talking about the legal jurisdiction, the American attempt to be the world's legal jurisdiction. In fact, we were hearing from Michael Hudson last week, Martin, weren't we, about this attempt of the Americans to dominate the international order themselves. So it's not an international order if they're trying to dominate it. They're a nation and they're looking after their national interests. So there's a great big hypocrisy at the heart of all of this. But then there's so many other, for example, the unified command structure that the United States built up in the noughties. They were thinking about doing it in the 1990s. In the noughties, they got this thing called the unified command structure, where they've got a military command for every part of the world. So you've got CENTCOM, EUCOM, AFRICOM, and all of these decisions, Martin. I mean, the Americans now seem to think that anybody that causes the Americans any difficulty, any part of the world, their military will deal with them, by hook or by crook.
Well, I think what's happened over the last 5 years in particular is that the US military has been shown to be incompetent and incapable. They basically, they're still fighting World War II with their aircraft carriers. The Russians and the Chinese have got anti-ship missiles which will sink aircraft carriers in the first half an hour.
Actually, they're using these ATACMS at the moment, which are long-range battlefield missiles to actually hit Russia.
Yes, I know.
Maybe it's a good time to bring up this attack on Sevastopol and the attack on Kiev this week, because when I first saw that, I thought, we've got a NATO meeting coming up in 2 or 3 days' time, a big NATO meeting. Isn't it convenient that a children's hospital in Kiev has been hit?
Well, I've been reading a lot about that. Larry Johnson's pretty good. He's ex-CIA, and he says most likely, the most straightforward explanation is because the Ukrainians have got air defence. They shoot down incoming missiles, and some of them get hit, and then of course they fall on buildings that they're not supposed to fall on. So it's collateral damage kind of thing. But there's also a lot of suspicions that they actually timed that, they blew their own hospital up. Because I used to be an aid worker in Yugoslavia in the 1990s, and it's now well known that the Bosnians blew up their own bread queue just before a meeting of NATO, so they killed 60 of their own people, so they say, oh no, the terrible Serbs have killed our people, give us some weaponry.
This isn't this
week. They do this all the time.
The incident this week, is it?
No.
I mean, the chances are, surely this is a Russian missile that's hit this school, not an American missile.
No. There's people have been looking at it and they say it looks like a Ukrainian air defence missile. But obviously what we've got with the internet now, we've got a sort of, the knowledge of wisdom of crowds. So everybody's going through all of this.
What you get is each side is a little propaganda machine starts launching off. Oh, it's an American missile.
Well, I mean,
no, it's a Russian missile. At the end of the day, the real question is it feasible? This was done deliberately to set the scene for the NATO.
Yes, it is feasible.
Meeting?
That's a perfectly reasonable supposition.
Well, remember when there was one in Poland that Ukraine seemed to fire into Poland? It seemed to be determined.
That's right. And the Poles were very upset
in order
about that.
to try to get NATO to get boots on the ground, or more boots on the ground.
We've got a real nest of conspiracy theories here.
I saw
let him speak, Martin.
I saw a Ukrainian battalion's social media account even reporting this week that, hey, sorry, but it probably looks like this was one of our own, as you say, like a collateral damage situation.
So what I'll do is I will scry this from Martin and I will make sure that we put some links up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk so that you good listeners can have a look for yourself. Apparently the missiles are a different shape, and there was film of the missile coming in, so it may be that there can be some basic identification of whether this was a false flag attack. It's a lot more likely to be deliberate, isn't it?
I think it's perfectly reasonable to suppose that it might be deliberate because of the history of what NATO intelligence services and the Ukrainians have done. The attack on the Crocus theatre in Moscow suburb, those guys were fleeing towards Ukraine when they were captured. Yeah. So it's pretty. I mean, I think that the Russians have pretty much worked out, as far as they're concerned, that was Western intelligence services working with the Ukrainians. And of course, the murder of Zakharchenko, who was the prime minister of Donbass Republic, he was murdered by a bomb in a light fitting in a restaurant. And so were Zivi and Motorola, who were paramilitary leaders. They were murdered. And, of course, this stuff is all in the news in Russia. You know, Russia's quite a sophisticated place. People follow the news closely. They know all about this stuff. But the Western public opinion is basically been fed a diet of drivel about it all for many years.
You see how quickly the White House press secretary, Matthew Miller, says this was a Russian attack on a hospital. And there was a White House journalist, bless him, that asked, well, can you just tell us how do you verify this information so quickly when in previous cases and other conflicts such as in Palestine you take weeks and then don't even give your opinion at all? You defer and you never actually state that this was an Israeli attack on a hospital. You know how, so there's a definite double standard. And it comes back to this question Tony before about the rule of law and fighting dirty, the rule of jungle. Sometimes when I talk about Assange to people, because I have conversations all the time going around in the orange suit, which I now have taken off, but it prompts questions. Sometimes people say to me, well, but war crimes happen all the time. I say, Julian revealed war crimes. They say, yeah, but that happens all the time. I go, yeah, that's fine, right? We know that. But there's a difference between doing something in the darkness and getting away with it versus jailing and actually torturing, according to the UN, the journalist who reveals it. That is a whole new paradigm that we have not dealt with in the West for a very long time. You probably have to go back centuries, right, to find someone literally being straight up prosecuted or tortured for simply revealing the state's crimes. I mean, I don't know. When was the last time this happened in the United Kingdom?
Well, don't forget we've had the war in Ireland and all the rest of it. So in actual fact, there's an awful lot of dirty business which has gone down around here. The point I would make about all of this is going back to the 1970s, the Gladio infrastructure in Italy, the kidnapping of Aldo Moro, the Prime Minister, the bombing of Bologna railway station. There's a book called La Repubblica dei Stragi Impuni, which is written by Posimato, who's the head of the Italian Supreme Court. He's dead now. Basically said, police investigate all of this. We know who did all this. It was NATO intelligence services.
But
they did it.
On the other side, was it Udolf Ulfkotti, the German journalist, who actually wrote a book all about how the intelligence services infiltrate the press,
everything.
We had a clip from Loki last week talking about how the one of the chief military correspondents or foreign correspondents on Sky News was a former person who'd been working for NATO. The idea that there's this sort of revolving door in industry we know about, that you've got a powerful lobby like the pharmaceutical lobby. People will go, and now, isn't it Patrick Vallance has just been chosen to be some sort of science minister from the pharmaceutical industry into government, and then even further into government as a minister in the House of Lords. So these revolving doors are quite well known about. So the lobbyist that suddenly becomes a minister, and you think, oh God, haven't I seen him before somewhere with a different suit on? I think, but yes, but when it comes to the press and the military, people don't necessarily realise that this is going on.
Yeah, Loki is great at revealing those sort of things. If you guys are not following him, he knows his stuff. And it is the type of thing that, before I started really paying attention to the media, like I have since campaigning on Assange last 5 years, I would have thought someone telling me that was like, there was some truth to it, but that it sounded a bit like of a conspiracy theory. But it doesn't take long. Once you actually look into it, it's really clear. I mean, there's Operation Mockingbird. I mean, there are former heads of the CIA that have come out, can't remember the name off the top of my head, but have said that, yeah, we've got people all up in the media, you know, and there's been a bunch of former CIA whistleblowers or people just speaking out about it. And it's not really surprising when you think about it. If your concern is to control the narrative, to maintain your hegemony and be able to, you know, maintain your security, aka, you know, do whatever you want, wherever you want and get away with it, to maintain your global control of the planet, of course you're going to want to go and control the media. It's the smart move if you want to be a good tyranny and
yeah.
stay in the shadows.
What it does is it turns news bulletins into adverts, really, for war. And sort of propaganda. So there's someone reading out some kind of auto cue, a bit like Biden before he went off message yesterday. So any idiot can do that, really. I mean, I think it was the playwright,
karaoke president.
Well, that's right. The playwright Dennis Potter called these people glorified bus conductors. You know, you just take someone who's not got no real discernment or no ability to penetrate into a story and to uncover it. Just stick an auto cue in front of them, and off they go. So the book is, by the way, if people are interested, and it's a friend of ours, Paul Barbara, Martin and I worked with quite closely in the 9/11 Truth campaign many years ago, who actually got this, arranged to get it translated into English, and it's called Prostitutes, Udo Aufkotti, because it was in German originally, embedded in the pay of the CIA. And it's, came out in October 2019, but it gives you a really good, I think, brilliant insight into the closeness of the military and the press. And I think that's, in a way, Matt, this is the thing that Julian punched a hole right through.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was this idea that the military can just tell everybody what they want them to hear and censor what they can't. So, for example, we've just been hearing about the children's hospital attack on Kiev, a whole bunch of stuff that hasn't been in the mainstream press. I suppose, ultimately, what everyone wants to know is who's going to be the new Julian Assange. He's obviously off. He's retiring. He's swimming. He's having supper with his kids, etc. Are there enough people around, do you think, to do the job? Because there are people who've been put off, but there's other people who've been inspired by him. Yeah,
that's right. It's a wonderful question. I think we've got an inevitable wave of truth and new information coming. The Assange case is a terrifying tyrannical threat, but I think we will find ways around it. I think it's just the time for that. The information age is upon us. It is a huge battle, and we have to be mindful, we have to be careful, but I just think there's an inevitable force, and especially the fact that we've managed to free Julian, although he suffered an awful lot, and he is now recovering. I think Julian will be back, but we should not rely upon him. Once he gets well, I think it's inevitable. You can't, leopard doesn't change his spots. He is coming back. I think the writing's on the wall, but we shouldn't, as you say, rely on him. I think the idea is we should have multiple WikiLeaks. And I love the way social media can play a part in this. I thought TikTok was really probably a lot of people listening still think it is, like just a place for cat videos and silly dance crazes. But what I was being surprised to find was that when I started putting content on there about Assange and other things, I got much more interaction there than on other platforms like Twitter.
Yeah, this is the algorithms, isn't it?
And that's right. And I put a video on there, and sometimes I got 500,000 views on a couple of them, whereas on Instagram and Twitter, maybe a couple of thousand. And I was like, what's going on here?
Two.
And then why is the US now trying to censor TikTok? Is this related? Because they've got less control of it. I mean, Zuckerberg and less so Musk, but even Musk, they are embedded into that.
I think system. Every bit as much Musk, actually.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, he is. I mean,
he's maybe just a bit better at PR than Zuckerberg is.
Yeah, he's got a less of a tight control than Zuckerberg, I'd say. But there's still, when it comes down to it, there's still clearly filtering things.
Well, you mentioned Craig Murray. He's done quite a lot of work on this whole idea of shadow banning. So if someone starts to say things that aren't liked, whether it's Google on the YouTube platforms. What happens is you just can't find it on the search, even if you're searching for it.
Right.
The other thing is it doesn't pop up on your feed. It's gone. So you get basically it's a blacklisting system. It might be various shades of grey, but Craig is the sort of person who, if he's got 20,000 followers, this might pop up on 2 of them on their feed, and the rest of them just won't see it even.
Yeah, there's the great thing, the Twitter files. So to his credit, Musk did release the Twitter files to a couple of good journalists, Matt Taibbi, and there was another fella. They came into the talk here last year with Russell Brand hosted. It was great, and went along to that, and it was great. If you look into the Twitter files, they really did reveal that the CIA was having weekly sit-downs with the leaders of Facebook, Twitter, and NBC and CNN and Fox, I believe, weekly briefings on what sort of content they were going to ask them to censor and control. There was also directly employees of the CIA and NSA working in these companies like Twitter. And Matt Taibbi said they had a raft of controls and ways that they could reduce the visibility of certain content and so that it wasn't seen. And so it is a real thing. There is evidence for it, and it's now out there. So the truth is out there if you're just willing to look for it. And but I think that it's a wonderful paradigm, and if we can just get a system that is free from the censorship, wow, what an amazing tool we have to share truthful information. And of course there's going to be conspiracy theories and misinformation amongst it, but watch out for anyone saying that that's what we need to police, because that's going to be inevitable, but the truth will out. I think if we give
Telegram
the freedom...
Keir Starmer was one of those people who said, oh, Telegram, this is a terrible thing, with all sorts of conspiracy theories being spread on this thing called Telegram. Yep. So there are various platforms. Obviously, TikTok is one. But it's, in a way, it's funny, isn't it? The internet has sort of gone up and down. The internet started came into most people's minds around about in the 1990s, where you could first get yourself a cheap dial-up internet account and put a website up there. And actually, in those days, I think, if you did a search, you would find what you were looking for. As sites suddenly became, like one of mine on the Bilderbergers, started to become overwhelmed by as the Bilderberg meeting came along during the year, you'd find... I mean, I would actually got a phone call one year from the service provider saying, we've had to take your website down, you're under attack. And I said, well, actually, no, I'm not under attack. It's just that there's lots of people finding out about this for the first time. Tens of thousands of people around the world are looking at what is this Bilderberg thing? Because I had some memos from them and the press releases, which they say at the top, not for publication. I published them online. And so what you've got is, as it goes up and down, because the internet, I remember reading this a long time ago, Matt, and maybe you can corroborate. I don't know if it's, your view of how it all started, but the idea is that, the internet started as a kind of military communications network for nuclear war, so that it wasn't, there were no central nodes that the information could flow. And what happens with censorship online is that the internet detects censorship as damage and routes around it in some way. So, here's some part of the internet is stopping this information getting through. So the network detects this as damage in the, nuclear bomb has hit this part of the network, so we're going to go round the side. I just rather like that idea, but I think that's why these big social media companies came along, to try and scoop up everybody's individual content, make them think, oh, this is the place, just put it on here and everyone will see it. And now what people are realising is these algorithms are stopping people actually. What they've tried to do is sort of privatise the internet with things like Facebook and Twitter. And the great thing about TikTok is it's shown you, no, this is not actually doing what you thought it was doing. So I guess the only way to do it is kind of switch the internet off, and then maybe no one will be able to share. There will be no way to get around the censorship then. Yeah,
it's just we've got to be mindful that all these platforms, even trying to sing the praises of TikTok, it's just a lesser of evils. Yeah. We do need a platform that is safe against censorship, and the time for it has come. People have to realize that, the more if you think about it, the more we conduct our lives and speak in these spaces, when you talk about complete surveillance and the power to censor your voice, this is an unprecedented time in history. So it's not just censoring what you're hearing, but what you're saying. This is really important. The more we speak online, we cannot allow ourselves to be censored by sort of unaccountable powers in the dark. So, I'd love to hear people's ideas. I know there's something called Panquake and others, but, or platforms, I don't know, like Rumble. I'm really interested to explore now what is possible in that space, but we do need a movement to those type of platforms that are free from censorship and that are also offering privacy, control over privacy as well.
Well, the thing is, the other side likes to pretend to do that too. So it will pretend to do, hey, here's a great new platform, everyone. You can come on here, and actually, it's the dark side behind it. I mean, if just one example, Brighteon. So one of my correspondents said, "Oh, you should get onto Brighteon, Tony." It took me like 3 days to actually get an account registered. Now, most people won't bother with that. What it was doing was saying, oh, we'll email you a thing. You've got to click on your email to verify it. But no email arrived. And the thing is, the verification email times out after 10 minutes or something. So actually, it's impossible to register. So I actually took the trouble to get hold of their because I mean a lot of the content that they're putting on there is brilliant. It's really, it's obviously an alternative to YouTube of some sort. And so eventually they said, oh, it's okay. Yes, we've had this problem before. Yeah. So to have a new system for registering new people, because I am like the 1 in 1,000 people who will bother to actually find a link to get to the support people to tell them, look, it's impossible to register on your platform. So what you're dealing with here is a very sophisticated, I'd say that's some sort of NSA operation or something similar, maybe, another intelligence service, maybe a private business that is blacklisting Brighteon. So saying, look, these guys, we don't really want anyone registering on here. Say, for example, with a forum. An internet discussion forum, to try and stop people registering on there, to hack it, or to make it impossible to register new people. Because I ran this thing, the UK 9/11 Truth Forum, from about 2003 to about I suppose it was about 2013 or something, for nearly 10 years. And we had a fantastic discussion on there, which was very, very, all newcomers immediately got access to it. And then if they started messing around, I could just delete them and get rid of them. But it created a great space. And that's the sort of thing I think that these new companies like Facebook have tried to sort of mimic that idea. Anyone can be here. But then as soon as the truth starts getting through, they kind of ramp it down. Anyway, I think we also should talk a bit about the general election. I mean, we're going to talk a bit more about Ukraine, I think, in part 2.
One last thing.
Yeah, go on. Sure. Yeah.
It's not just that we need social media networks where it's not censored and where it's private. We also need devices that offer the same, because what I've discovered. Oh yeah, you've got one. What have you got there?
Android, I'm afraid.
No, okay, fail. But I'm rocking around with an iPhone, so okay, I'm the same. But what I've discovered is that they've all got backdoors that are built in specifically for the NSA and CIA. What I've been shocked to learn is that even I kind of thought companies like Windows come along and then the NSA and CIA go, oh, they're doing well. We will find a way to get a backdoor in there and da-da-da. No, it's from the start. It turns out Bill Gates' Microsoft's main financial investor was the CIA to begin with. So it's all from the beginning. Got to give them credit. It's quite smart. But we have to be smart and be aware, so that we really do. I think it's got to that point. I mean, when they're in the middle of conducting an active genocide and they've become torturing journalists, I think complacency needs to really go out the window, and we actually need to be smart and get organized and come up with other systems. So we need devices that do not have backdoors. And if you've got an Android or an Apple phone, they absolutely have a backdoor that no matter if you use Signal, which is supposedly a good encrypted app, if they want to, they can still get in through the baseline of your operating systems on Android and Apple. So, also love to hear any listeners that have suggestions. But
brilliant. Well, I've got actually a page on thisweek.org.uk which is called Diamonds in the Cesspool, and it's about these sort of platforms that have popped up and websites that have popped up to try and tell the truth. And so what we'll do, Matt, is if listeners want to suggest ones, hopefully that aren't fronts for the NSA pretending to be cool, so we will put them up on there. So that's for all sorts. I suppose that's for social media. I use vk.com as well, which there's been attempts to try and stop me using that. It's quite obvious, and I just had to reinstall it, and it started working fine. But I'll put those up on the thisweek.org.uk. If you go to, I think it's just called Diamonds in the Cesspool, which is an expression I got from Glenn over at Exodus, Glenn Jenkins, when he was dealing with I think it was the local council on musicians and people like that, when they were doing their free parties. So that's, I think, really useful to do that. And so, folks, if you can just, if you've got platforms you think are really good ones, that I think, actually, was it Duncan Campbell I interviewed a few weeks ago? He was suggesting one on the long interview I did with him, so I'll dig that out and put that on there too. Because you're absolutely right. We need to fight, rather than curse the darkness, we need to shine the light. Let's go this way, guys. Look, there's a small bunch of people over there doing something really good. Let's big them up rather than curse the obvious.
Totally, you can't. You got to be the alternative. I think more than try to.
It's funny you mentioned this week, because my phone. This is actually a Huawei phone,
right?
And quite an old one, and it works okay. Only thing is, last week Lee, who's one of the people over at Kumba, I was chatting with him. He said, "Oh, just message me, and just to make sure we had each other's numbers." Anyway, I messaged him something else because it had occurred to me I wanted to claim something else, and it came up for the first time I've ever seen this on my SMSs on this phone. It said fail, so it wouldn't send him an SMS. It sent him one earlier in the day. Later in the day, it just wouldn't send him anything. And so when I next saw him a few days later, I said, I showed him the phone. He said, "Oh yeah, a few people have said that to me, that they can't send SMSs, and I send a normal SMS message, because he's got an old kind of, one of these very basic old school cheap phones. For obvious reasons, he doesn't want a smartphone. And then from that moment onwards, right, this phone has stopped working. So if I phone somebody, the phone call carries on. I can't turn the phone call off, and the only way to stop the phone call is to reset the entire phone. And that's just it. So there's obviously these are all nudging us towards, don't use this phone, go and get a new one. This phone is no good anymore, Tony. You need to get rid of it. You need to buy a new phone. And that's a constant thing. It's almost like in the old days they used to try and get, well, they probably still do to a certain extent, harass phone numbers. So you think, I'm going to change my phone number. Then, of course, all your contacts, people that are trying to contact you, can't get hold of you anymore. And so there's a lot of this sort of techno-bullying, tech bullying going on. Anything more to say in response to that, Martin or Matt?
Well, I think the other thing they've got is they've got armies of trolls. The Brigade 77, British Army unit, I suppose they've got 1,000 members. They're all officers, so they're all on at minimum 30, 40 grand. And and it's named after Brigade 77, which is the Chindits, who were the stay-behind teams in Burma.
Nothing to do with the London bombings, then?
No, but of course, Ord Wingate, who set up the Chindits, also helped to set up the Haganah and the Irgun in Israel, because he was very pro-Israeli. So he helped the Israeli paramilitaries, who were basically terrorists. I mean, they bombed the King David Hotel, they killed Folk Bernadotte, they killed Lord Moyne, and loads of innocent civilians were blown up and shot by them. These are the people who inherited the State of Israel. That's how the State of Israel was created. And, of course, they weren't punished. They were rewarded. And when they point the finger at Hamas and just say, well, look, they're doing exactly the same as you did. They copied you. Yeah? You did that, they're doing that. But they expect that they are going to have a state at the end of it, just like you got one. And they're going to get it exactly the same way.
It's a double standard.
Well, yes, but and of course,
rules-based order when we want to apply the rules.
Anyway, but you got Brigade 77, but also, of course, the Israeli, what is it, 800 unit. So they've got people.
Unit 8200.
Yeah, they've got students are paid to sit there and enter into forums.
And you know what happens,
take
Martin?
things down.
Martin, you know what happens with this is that you also get major news stories being generated by these trolls, and it's people saying, "Oh, I'm being harassed. Yeah, but who are you actually being harassed by? Human beings, or by someone sitting in a psychological warfare office somewhere who's actually doing this and pretending to be an ordinary so there's a lot of, I think, a kind of almost like ghosting of these various accounts. It's not actually ordinary people. It's that they're doing it is to try and turn you into a victim. This whole thing of turning people into victims now. I mean, the Israelis have been doing it for decades, but we are the victim. I'm a victim. Actually, no, maybe not. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're just part of some sort of game that's being played online, a sort of journalistic sting.
They get obsessed with the idea of controlling the narrative, and then it leads to ludicrous situations like the so-called Ghost of Kiev aeroplane. During the beginning of the crisis, this phase of the crisis, there was supposedly this aeroplane that was going out and shooting down Russian planes every day. Some great hero was flying it, and all over the media has been pushed. And then, of course, somebody noticed this is actually a video game. Yeah? This is just this
is why the military so love to control the press, because they insert these stories in, as Annie Mashon brilliantly
the thing about this is, though, is that they're so obsessed with controlling the narrative that they've forgotten that the Russian army doesn't bother to control the narrative. They just try and control the battlefield. The narrative's secondary. And they convince themselves that if they can convince enough people... I mean, there's a load of nonsense come out this week about the Russians have had over 500,000 casualties. Most evidence suggests that they have nothing like that level of casualties.
How many then?
Well, the best estimates that I've seen, and this comes from McGregor and Ritter, who are ex-US military.
Pro-Russian, though.
Pro-Russian, but on the other hand, professionals. Yeah, they know how to assess these things.
Well, Scott Ritter said the whole war was going to be over in 2 weeks.
Well, that's because
that's not very professional.
Well, no, because that's okay. Well, people get things wrong as well. You got
even you and I get things wrong.
Well, indeed. I mean, what we thought at one stage. I mean, when it started, I thought, well, we're going to have sort of World War II style envelopments here. But clearly not. The technology's changed. I've been reading about this earlier. The Americans are going to supply all this AI first-person view drones. And of course these drones do make it very difficult to manoeuvre, because you can be seen immediately. And the AI will know exactly, so they'll know exactly what to...
Can you explain that, please?
Well, because the first-person drones, first-person view drones, FPV drones, they are turning the battlefield into a kind of completely surveyed space. So, your tank can be knocked out by one of these things, and one of these things doesn't cost very much. So it's completely changed.
When you say first-person view, what
well,
does
it means
that mean?
Somebody sitting there on it with a console, and they can see what they're doing. Okay. But, of course, what they're doing now is they're developing AI swarms, which don't even need a person to sit there reusing
That's right. Yeah, they've got autonomous weapons, drones now. I mean, we really are in Terminator 2 now. There's this terrifying protocol that was designed... by Israel for use in Palestine and Gaza. What was the name of it?
Daddy's Home, it was called.
Yeah, Daddy's Home?
And that's right. So
Daddy's Home,
you wait until the guy comes back into his family, wait till he's there, and then you drop the bomb on to kill as many people as possible.
They're trailing the alleged combatants, or whoever their target is, all the way home. The drone's flying. They've got them in his sights. They wait till he gets home to be with his family, to take out the family home while they're at dinner, and they wait till a specific dinner time. Yeah. To do it. I mean, how, if you want to talk about evil, how, you could say it's just like so horrific. It is terrorism that's designed to intimidate. And, that's why this type of technology.
And demoralize as well.
Demoralize, exactly. Yeah. And this is another part of the arsenal of the security forces, or the tyrannical forces, depending on your point of view, that exists now, that really makes it, I think, incumbent on us all to really look at how we can fight back, or create systems that work for us, to protect us, because you add it all together, what there is unprecedented. Total global surveillance. They have microphones in our pockets. I mean, they literally do. It sounds ridiculous. They do. They've got AI monitoring all that information. I came to this conclusion, then I read, of course, Julian Assange came to the same one 10 years ago, ahead of the curve he is, saying that it doesn't really matter that they can surveil us all because it's too much information and they're not that bright. They can't do enough with it. But he said, look out it will be a problem when they've got artificial intelligence, which can actually try to make some order out of these, millions of bits
in
of
the past,
information.
they collected information. The Stasi used to have, card index files, so you had to literally listen to the phone call, and transcribe it.
Whereas now they've got a warehouse full of even communications going back decades, and now they can actually sort through it and make sense of it. To me, that's a problem, that they could identify certain patterns. They could figure out certain social and political movements and predict.
They do it all.
What with these massive profile databases of the entire population, they can literally press a button. I mean, funnily enough, the IBM Hollerith system used to be used by the Nazis for this. So they would use these punch card system back in the Second World War, which they were paying IBM to use these machines to say, for example, we want all the Jews in Dresden, and they press a button on the machine, the cards would go tick, tick, tick. After a few minutes, you'd have a whole bunch of addresses of cards of specific individuals for the SS to go out and arrest. Now, if you transpose that onto the modern day profile databases of the entire population with the police, these little police vans I've seen Big Brother Watch talking about this week, out in the street doing facial recognition on everybody.
Right.
This is the problem. That surveillance is incredibly pernicious, and in fact what they could do, they could say, for example, decide that every Christian in a city was going to be arrested, or because they were under suspicion for some reason, and they wouldn't have to necessarily tell people why they're being arrested. They would they could just be incarcerated. And this is why it seems to me they're trying to move towards this kind of wartime position, because that would give the authorities an excuse to just simply arrest and clamp down on everyone and get rid of civil liberties.
That's right. And people will say, well, we need these security services to look after us. We need this global surveillance to look out for terrorists. But how many terrorists have they actually caught? I've heard potentially none, actually.
Well, the other thing is
they have tracked down journalists and killed them. It's what you call a turnkey tyranny, this system. And you might go, well, it's fine to give them this power because we trust the United States. I mean, at this point, I don't know why you would, but some people still do.
Those Nazis that went over there after the war.
Yeah. The problem is that, as I say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so there is no state that should be entrusted with this type of power. Total mass surveillance, robot dogs with guns. This is all the makings of a tyranny, turnkey tyranny. So we have to remove that ability in whatever ways we can. And I think there is hope. I don't want to, just take a dark
Don't you ever think maybe it'd be better to go back to New Zealand and chill out?
Yeah, why? What me worry?
They can observe you in New Zealand. There's no way you
well, yes, but it's a different kind of world.
Why I started to love the bomb, isn't it? But it is tempting to drop out and tune in, but to me that doesn't actually lead to you. It's procrastinating. It doesn't lead to you feeling safe.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah,
the Americans. This is Declassified UK, one of our favourite sites. Yesterday revealed America's secret special forces flights to Israel from a UK base on Cyprus. The US military has been flying covert planes to Israel from RAF Akrotiri since the bombing of Gaza began. Declassified has discovered. So they've done a special report on this thing yesterday. Unmarked planes are used by US forces to fly from Cyprus to Israel. As recently at the end of June, the aircraft are believed to be used by secretive 427th Special Operations Squadron and the CIA. They also find 26 huge US military transport planes have landed at UK base on Cyprus, believed to be carrying weapons for the Israelis. Revelations could further implicate British ministers in war crimes. The US Air Force has been sending unmarked planes from Britain's base on Cyprus to Israel since it began bombing Gaza, it can be revealed. The planes are all C2, for all you nerdy plane spotters out there, C295 and CN235 aircraft, which are believed to be used by American Special Forces. They found 18 of these aircraft had gone from the sprawling British airbase on Cyprus, RAF Akrotiri, to Israel's coastal city of Tel Aviv. Martin, this is, we know all about what's going on, or at least hopefully most people do, about the drones, and Daddy's Home and all this sort of thing. The mass murder, the figures we'll be talking about in a minute. Because although we know nearly 40,000 civilians, the Lancet this week has talked about 180,000 civilians possibly being killed by the Israelis. So, but this is our good old RAF. Remember the Battle of Britain and all that, fighting the Luftwaffe. Now it seems that we are the Luftwaffe. We are the Nazis. We have decided we can do anything we want to anybody. And we're helping the Israelis in these war crimes. So these specific individuals involved in these flights and these ministers authorising it, they are potentially war criminals too.
Well, that's right.
With our money.
That's right. And of course, they have been given legal advice, which said, yes, you are potentially war criminals, but they won't bring the legal advice out. Sadiq Khan said this. They won't tell us what the legal advice is. We know what it is. They know that they're potentially being war criminals. The basic criteria, of course. We fought a guerrilla war against Daoka in the 1950s to kick the British out of Cyprus. And then, of course, in 1956, it was used as the base for the Suez trickery, where the Israelis attacked the Egyptians, then the British and the French went in supposedly to separate the two sides, but it was all a stitch-up. And, of course, the Cypriots don't want that base there. They've never wanted it there. In order for them to get independence, they had to agree to have the base, because that allowed Britain to project and the Americans to project into the Middle East from there. And of course, they used an Akrotiri to fly to bomb Yemen. We're at war with Yemen, which I find is absolutely disgusting. I mean, that was not discussed at all, was it? We were promised that if we were going to go to war, we would have a parliamentary discussion.
Now, Crispin Blunt,
signed off.
Crispin Blunt,
no
MP, Tory MP, no longer. He was kicked out of the Tory party. He wasn't allowed to stand. He was the first MP, and this was around about middle of October, to say, well, we better be careful about supporting all this sort of thing, because it means that British ministers, the Prime Minister, etc., could be taken to The Hague for war crimes or the International Court of Justice. Less than a week later, he was arrested and accused of being both a child molester and a rapist. Now, I don't know what's happened with those. I've not heard any more about all of this, but it seems pretty obvious to me that the criminal justice system is totally and utterly corrupt in this country, and it's being used basically to smash over the head innocent people, not just over in Gaza, but here too, and an MP here who was standing up for human rights.
Well, it
destroyed his career as well, by the way.
Well, it's gangsterism, isn't it? That's what we're up against. I mean, there's Richard Cottrell, who used to be a Tory MEP for this area, and he lives in Italy, and he wrote a book about Gladio, the NATO fascist mafia dagger at the heart of Europe. So in actual fact, the NATO intelligence services are in bed with the fascists, so they're directly directing them, and they're also in bed with the mafia. Like Meyer Lansky worked very closely with the FBI in the 1950s in the US, and of course the top gangsters in the world are mostly Israeli nationals of one kind or another, both Russian and American. So that's what we're up against. And of course they control the international drugs trade. That's why they keep it illegal, so they can keep control of it. The dogs in the street know this. I was in Colombia in 2005 in a trade union delegation. Dogs in the street know that the CIA runs the drugs trade, and everybody knows it. But of course, liberal public opinion doesn't know it, because they live in a bubble. It's a sort of controlled, it's a controlled environment. My parents, who are now nearly in their 90s, they watch BBC News every day religiously, and it gives them a very distorted view of the world.
Of course. But I think what's special about this moment is that they're losing control of the narrative, largely because of social media. Even though they're able to limit and restrict information, they're not able to do it sufficiently. And if you look at polling, like even in the US and the UK, where they're controlling the narrative the most through the media and social media, they're just not succeeding on social media enough. And over 50% in both countries believe that Palestine, should be free from this. And so that's really significant. And I think it is terrifying.
Most of our history, we have been dictated to by whether it's a monarch, a military, Cromwell, military dictatorship. These various, the elite of basically, it may be just for a couple of decades after World War II, we had a bit of democracy. But Martin is always saying, there's never really been, the people have never really been allowed to rule. So it's kind of reverting back to type, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to recontrol it, put it back in the box. I don't think they will ultimately succeed. I think it is the battle of the moment for the information, controlling information. I think that's why they're becoming more tenacious. That's why we have something like going after an Assange who really did just fundamentally do journalism. But he just did it in a profoundly more efficient way using the information age's technology. He didn't hack. He didn't do anything actually illegal. But he did it so well. He did his job so well, making use of the internet to receive and share and publish, that they are terrified because, as Martin puts, it's like they've been able to have the pretense of a democracy, technically be one, but control the narrative so much that we don't effectively vote them in and out, or because we don't know what they're really doing. And Julian, as you said earlier, beautifully punched a hole in that. They got terrified. They went after him. And we're talking about really, I think, going back to the dark ages in terms of locking dissidents up just for telling the truth, straight and literally for that, not sort of pinning him on something else.
But also they assassinate people. They blow things up.
But that's old
people.
School.
But I mean, they've got that as well.
They've got that, yeah. And so I always point out to people that, like, some people say to me, oh yeah, they're lucky. Julian Assange was lucky he wasn't in Russia. They would have just put a bullet in its head. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is far more terrifying to me than that, because they're maintaining the pretense that this is just, that this is a legal process, wherein in fact, the UN rapporteurs and redeemed that this was arbitrary detention and torture. And if you think about, would you rather have a bullet in the back of your head or spend the rest of your days locked in one room by yourself, totally excommunicado? That's what he was facing in the US. He was literally almost in that condition in Belmarsh, 23 hours solitary. I mean, so my heart went out to him every day. It made me feel so anxious, just like the guy is just slipping away. Is beautiful. He's got a beautiful mind. And he said to his friend that came out, is that he felt his mind was being burgled. When you're cut off like that, there's another horrific letter I've read by someone in solitary confinement 24 hours of the day, a CIA whistleblower, Joshua Schultz. He basically is begging to meet a cockroach so he can at least pretend to have a conversation with it. Begging to be sent to Auschwitz, and said he would go to the gas knob and at least he could guzzle that down with relish and end this horrific, isolation. So it's terrifying. That's what we're going to get out of the Espionage Act. If we don't burn it, we've at least got to take out the solitary confinement and put a public interest defence in there. The Espionage Act is the greatest legal weapon at the moment. To me, it's you line up all of these elements in terms of global surveillance, robot dogs with guns, but we're
laughing here, folks. And do you know what? Yeah. That's good.
It's nervous laughter,
because you have to poke the fun at this stuff. It really is. It's like
the only way to deal with it.
You're supposed to vote for this dystopian nightmare moron.
Yeah. Oh my gosh!
No, we're not voting for you. So you, as you can see,
I'm
trying to drag things back to the general election.
Yeah, well, we should. I do want to do that. But that's the finally thing, the cherry on the top, the most dangerous heart of it all is once they jail anybody literally for revealing their war crimes, their torture, that is when all those other elements, that's the turnkey tyranny. Jailing and torturing and prosecuting Assange was turning the key, in my view. So while he's out, and while it's not a firm legal precedent, it still is a precedent in terms of the action of doing it, and the fact that they've used it. We're not safe until we burn the Espionage Act.
One of the nice things about Julian is that actually what's happened is they have revealed what they're most afraid of. So everyone should just copy Julian, and that really will upset the evildoers. Look, coming back to the general election, but not so far in that direction. Another story from Declassified UK: the Israel lobby funded half of Keir Starmer's cabinet. Labour's top team has accepted hundreds of thousands of pounds from the Israeli funding lobby. Pro-Israel lobbyists have donated 13 out of Labour's 25 cabinet members since they were first elected to Parliament. Declassified can reveal the list of recipients recipients includes Prime Minister Keir Starmer, his Deputy Angela Rayner, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, Jonathan Reynolds, who will oversee arms exports to Israel at as UK Trade Secretary, is another beneficiary alongside Labour's election mastermind Pat McFadden. His responsibilities now include national security. That's handy. Now, some of the donations were provided by Labour Friends of Israel, LFI, a lobby group which takes MPs on fact-finding missions to the region. Reeves, McFadden, Reynolds and Technology Secretary Peter Kyle were listed recently as vice chairs of the Labour Friends of Israel. In fact, they've done a nice little graphic here on Declassified UK. Martin, I'm just looking through this. I think I'm right in saying there's actually more people who've been directly part of the Israel lobby in this cabinet than there were in the previous Tory cabinet.
Mm.
Yeah, well, they've been infiltrating for a very long time. We know the Al Jazeera.
I'll put a link up to this on our show page, by the way, folks. If you want to see these mugshots of these criminals helping, well, they are war criminals. Anyone that's taking money from the Israelis right now are war criminals.
I'll say it. I'll be called a pedophile next week, but Keir Starmer is a war criminal. Yeah.
Well, why specifically?
Why is he? Okay, specifically because he is a human rights lawyer, and so he has no excuse. He cannot plead ignorance. But back in October, he was asked by an interviewer, bless him, who actually did some probing work, to ask him this question: does Israel have the right to cut off food and water to the entire population of Gaza? Keir Starmer, a human rights lawyer, said, yes, I believe they have that right. That is egregious. He cannot plead ignorance. He did not simply say that. He was lying through his teeth. And that is the crime of crimes. Are you kidding? To cut off food and water to an entire population of over a million people, that was 50% children. Like, that is inciting genocide. That is literally an act, that is illegal under international law to incite genocide. You have a legal obligation, in fact, to prevent, let alone to fan the flames and incite it. So he is a war criminal, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's terrifying to me. He's one of the chief architects going after Assange as the head of the CPS. He was secretly flying to Washington. That's another reason I find him terrifying, while pretending that Julian was hiding only from some spurious alleged allegations in Sweden. That was the pretense, and he was literally, it's been discovered again by, bless them, Declassified UK. They revealed these secret flight logs, him going in these meetings. They found records that the records were destroyed in the United Kingdom, but preserved in the US. That Starmer, as head of the CPS, was meeting with the CIA and the Department of Justice multiple times. I think it was 4 trips to discuss getting Assange extradited there. So you see how duplicitous he is, how embedded in this, tyrannical security state he is. I understand his wife may be a Zionist herself, and I think her brother is, in the IDF. And, as you point out, more MPs funded by Israel Friends than in the Tory cabinet. I say Labour is more Tory than Tory, and at least in terms of foreign policy, and by that I mean killing people for oil and gas. Now, I'm terrified of this cabinet. Martin,
you're a member of the Labour Party. Well, you actually voted for Keir Starmer to be their leader.
This is we got it. It's like being in the Polish United Workers' Party in 1980 when Solidarność. They had 10 million members at the end of August 1980, and 1 million of those members were simultaneously members of the Polish United Workers' Party. That's how change comes about. Yeah, you don't just walk away. And the Labour Party in New Zealand, when they had the Rogenomics in the 1980s, the Labour Party changed the electoral system and smashed all of that. And it didn't work entirely. The economy was neoliberalised and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, the Labour Party managed to cleanse itself of that stain. Yeah, and Roger Douglas himself didn't get elected.
I look forward to them cleansing that stain and arresting Keir Starmer in the years to come, and starting again. But Corbyn back, or
Corbyn has stood as an independent because he had to.
Yeah,
but he wasn't going to leave the Labour Party. Why should I leave? They're the cuckoos.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's why I stayed in it. But I mean, the point about Al Jazeera showed that the Shai Moffat, who was a Mossad guy, was saying, well, we've got £1 million to spend on.
He was a political attaché at the Israeli embassy, Shai Massot. Massot, M-A-S-O-T.
Yes,
Massot.
I know, but he was basically a Mossad guy, this political attaché.
Yes. Go on, sorry. What's that, Matt?
But did you really, what did he mean, what did Tony mean when he said you voted for Starmer? You didn't prefer him over Corbyn, surely?
No, because
Corbyn wasn't there.
No, because Corbyn wasn't. Right. Corbyn had stood down, and so it's Rebecca Long Bailey versus Starmer.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now Rebecca Long Bailey, I like her, but she just didn't. You know, we had to take a punt on a shift. And of course, Starmer said at the time, if you vote for me, I will govern from the centre.
You trusted him. Of course,
you
trusted him.
Yeah, but I know. But we know now. We now know. Listen, precisely because I voted for him, I don't feel any desire to support him whatsoever now. Because we gave you your chance, mate. We gave you your chance, and you blew it.
I totally understand you wanting Labour to beat the Conservatives. A lot of people felt that way. We've had the Tories so long. Personally, however, I did not feel that way. I mean, I didn't have to live here through all of that, so it's a little easier for me to come over here and have my ideas. But although Labour, I will give them, I think they have slightly, it's hard to tell, but slightly more friendly policies to Britain in terms of but it's really hard to tell at this point the difference. I think they are still very Tory, even on domestic policy. But what terrifies me is the foreign policy.
But he's going to have this an albatross round his neck.
Vicious. I think he's more
he's going to have this an albatross round his neck. It took a while for Tony Blair to show his true colours. Yeah. We've had to put up with it because he was after years of the destruction of the mining industry, all the things that you've got to be realistic about what you can and can't do in the short run.
Okay, folks, let's
getting away with a genocide at the minute.
Well, but the thing is, he's going to walk straight into. We've got a demonstration not tomorrow because it's Gay Pride tomorrow, but next Saturday there'll be a demonstration in Bristol. There'll be another one in London. Well, I'm not letting up on this.
No,
and if you can,
right.
and if we're going to see what's going to happen now, the Israelis are going to go to war in Lebanon. That will draw the Americans in.
Maybe.
And then Nasrallah has said, if the Akrotiri base is used to attack us, we will attack that base. Yeah. And we've got the missiles. We've got the missiles to hit it.
Nasrallah's also said. Nasrallah has also said, if they stop killing people in Gaza, if there's a ceasefire there, we will just automatically, no negotiation, we will stop all of our aggression towards the Israelis.
But the Smotrich and the right wing in Israel do not want to
anyway, can we just get back to the new cabinet? We've got a new cabinet this week, and one of the most interesting people, Emily Thornberry, who I'm afraid I find particularly irritating when I see her on the TV or hear her on the radio. She has been, her nose is out of joint. She was Shadow Attorney General, but somebody called Richard Hermer has suddenly popped out of nowhere, like they do, turned into a lord. He's not even elected as an MP, and he's been popped in to be Attorney General. So this is Middle East Eye of saying fairly positive things about him. And UK appoints new Attorney General critical of Israeli rights violations. But I'm sure I remember reading, it might not be declassified, but one of these other websites saying that he's actually very closely connected to some of the actually pro-Zionist Israeli legal profession in London. So he's completely out of nowhere. Where has this guy come from? Richard Hermer is his name. What they're saying in Middle East Eye, who's the journalist Rayan Udin, writing in London, says that he opposed the anti-boycott, divestment and sanctions bill and was also amongst the Jewish lawyers arguing Israel should respect international law in Gaza. So maybe that's why they've picked him. Anyway, he's not a member of Parliament. He will instead be given a life peerage.
Well, I think what's happening here, Starmer is very well connected with the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, MI5, MI6. He's absolutely embedded in that. So he's got a list of things that he's got.
So he's been told Emily Thornberry is actually intellectually not up to we want a job for this guy. Maybe, yeah.
And that's we want him to get a job.
I can't imagine Emily Thornberry, Attorney General.
Well, I mean, she could have been it, and she was actually, that was the role she was playing, but she's obviously been pushed out.
She wasn't happy about it.
No, it's going to be.
She waited until Monday this week about issuing a statement saying she was very sorry and surprised, Martin, to continue her work and and surprised not to be able to continue her work into government. So this is what happens, isn't it? You do all the hard work, like the local Green councillor we had on here the other week, saying that she does all the hard work to get the Greens in, and then literally as the general election is about to happen, when they get a Green MP, she's booted out the Green Party. So this is the way these party politics seems to work. Is all the time you're in opposition and out of the way, you can say what you want, you can campaign whatever so that people vote for you. Then once it comes to power, they've already decided these are the ones who are going to be in power. And thank you very much for helping us get into power, but cheerio.
Yeah, well, the apparatchik here are fully in charge of the Labour Party now. It's the regional office. When we had the elections for Bristol West, or Bristol Central as it now is, for the executive committee, we had to do it on Zoom because it was at the end of the COVID stuff. And we were literally kept waiting for hours and hours and hours. Some people got, we said there was some kind of a technical glitch. And of course, a lot of people just had to put the kids to bed or wherever. They disappeared. And then they got in the people they wanted through manipulation of that meeting.
Yeah.
And that's what you're up against.
My main takeaway, though, on this election is that if you're forced to choose between genocide and genocide, with a few perks, like, we need to look at the actual system, and one of the ways I think it should be transformed is for Britain to have, to get off first past the post. There are various other systems which afford more representation for, smaller parties to have more influence. I know I can speak on New Zealand. In the 90s, we'd had a big campaign that was, gotta be MMP. I'm not saying that has to be the one, but there was a big campaign. I don't know who brought it about. I mean, I was a youngster, but we brought that in, and since then the smaller parties have had more of a say.
Yeah.
And people might say, well, does that mean that there's sort of chaos and you can never decide? Well, no, it doesn't seem to be. They pretty much seem to have a big round table of negotiations before they determine the coalitions. So what happens is the major parties struggle to get a coalition. They have to form an alliance with the smaller parties. The smaller parties then sort of barter which of their policies that the other party has to adopt, and they come to these agreements, and it just seems to bring about. So therefore, it just means there's more representation of different voices. Yeah. I mean, you look at the election result. Labour, I think, got around 33% something of the vote, but they get something like 66 odd % of the seats. That's double the power they've gotten from.
And do you know what? I've heard several times this week Starmer saying, well, we now have the mandate to do this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, as Martin and everyone else would point out, no, you don't.
Yeah,
you haven't got any mandate, mate.
Don't at all.
Well,
and it was 22% of the population.
System. Yeah. It's not like...
You weren't arguing the opposite when the Tories were in, weren't you?
No.
Yes, you were. When the Tories were here, you were saying, oh, no, they haven't got a mandate. They haven't got a mandate.
No, the Tories have never... Margaret Thatcher
never
got 50% of the vote in this country.
Mm-mm-mm.
Never. And if we'd had a proportional system...
Okay, can we get to the crux of this first past the post thing? Because at the crux of it is that you've got these two major parties, neither of whom are going to change the system. Occasionally you get a little opportunity, like, for example, with the Lib Dem coalition in 2010. Now, the Lib Dems should have surely said to the Tories, look, but you've got to change the system.
Well,
and they didn't do that.
They had the referendum on single transferable vote, which was lost because the groundwork hadn't been done.
There was no proper campaigning on that.
Doing that.
Well, yeah, there was no
because
proper
they basically
campaigning.
shot their own fox and our fox as well.
Well, it's time to do a campaign like that. Somebody get it started. Now's the time.
And by the way, under proportional representation, how many MPs would Nigel Farage's party Reform have got?
Probably around 60.
93 MPs. Yeah. Lots and lots.
And of course, the Greens would have had 40.
Let's not forget that the Greens and these smaller parties, if people could vote for them and didn't feel that their vote would be wasted if they were voting for them, there may have been far more people voting for these minor parties in a PR system. So that's how important it is.
So many people would have voted for another party, but forced, strategically, that's a smart thing to do. I mean, in the area that I am, it was pretty much the candidates polling were either Conservative or Labour neck and neck, whereas I would have personally preferred to vote Green and or somebody else. But strategically, you are throwing away your vote. I'm sorry. I tend to. This was I have to confess that I didn't do that this time. I didn't even think I was going to get to vote because I didn't think that my ID had come through. And so I, because we just immigrated back here. But it did. I showed up. I was quite surprised. I was on it and I was allowed to vote. So hadn't put much thought into it. And just in my heart, I was like, I can't vote for genocide. So I didn't. So, but if I thought about it, I'm pretty sure I would have been forced to vote for the Labour person. Which
presumably the Labour Party won. It's what's his name? It's Kingswood's constituency, isn't it?
Yeah, was it Kingswood? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because of course
he's the Mossad guy.
Yes, he's married. He's a gay man, and he's married to an ex-US, Israeli military officer.
Wow.
That's good old Bristol.
What's been happening is Blair has been Starmer has been parachuting these pro-Israeli people in.
Yeah.
And it's all. Don't forget all the row about Corbyn's anti-Semitism and so on. This has got the fingerprints of the Israeli embassy all over it. They work really hard to control both parties.
I'd like to do is I'd like to play you a bit of the mad ceremonial that we get once every 5 years in a new government, which is the all the various officials at the House of Lords, because they seem to be in charge of the House of Commons somehow. I don't know how it all works, this with the King in charge of the Lords, and the Lords then saying, oh yes, we're going to allow these Commons in now, these little commoners have just become MPs. But before we do that, there's a few stories. There's this amazing mad thing that's been in the news in the last couple of days, with somebody being found on CCTV last Wednesday on Clifton Suspension Bridge with a holdall with body parts in, being taken up there in a taxi. I don't know if you've come across this, Matt. It's in the mainstream all over the country. And the most amazing thing for me, Martin, since you've seen it, is the police are saying that there's no reason for people shouldn't approach this guy. He's fine. Listen, the guy's got 2 holdalls with body parts in, blood dripping out of it, and the police are saying that he's okay. We don't think he's dangerous in any way. Well, what are they talking about?
Well, obviously, this is a developing story, so we don't really know what's happened here. I've seen the picture of him, he's a black guy with a beard and a sort of hat. And he went up there in a taxi, and then I don't know what he was thinking of doing with the body parts, trying to throw him off the bridge or something.
I think
because the CCTV up there was even security. And they saw him doing this stuff, and they called the police.
We can use a bit of educated guesswork. His plan, it seems, was to chuck these suitcases over the bridge into the water, and maybe as the tide just take them out. But I mean, there's CCTV everywhere. The other thing is it's a major suicide spot, so there's a constant CCTV watching here. So anyone that sort of starts to creep out towards them, thinking of throwing themselves off, there's going to be someone around. So this is not the place to throw a body bag of body parts off, because there are going to be people all over the place keeping an eye on you. Yeah,
well, it doesn't sound that smart. That's why I'm thinking I was talking to my friend about this. It's not like a gangland killing. It's probably something just like his girlfriend or something like that he's killed, and he's trying to get rid of the body.
Police have said today there's body parts of 2 different people in these bags.
Okay, well, it might that could be some gangland aspects to it, but it doesn't sound very professional.
So is he in custody, or
no? He's still.
No, they've got photographs out of the guy all over the national media.
How is it you lock up a journalist and you won't lock up somebody who's carrying around body parts?
Well, they've got to find him.
They've got to find him first. Yeah, he's still running around.
He's at large.
Yeah,
okay,
he's at large. Yeah, so we'll be keeping an eye open.
People tried to bury their body in Barton Hill. They put it in a shed, and they said it was drugs and somebody to look after it for them, but it wasn't. It was actually body parts of the girl that this guy had killed. That's a more sensible place to hide a body, in somebody's garden shed, rather than take it into the CCTV on the bridge. That doesn't sound like he knows what he's doing at all. But there you are.
Not much to say about this other than this just the general state of violence and police. What on earth is going on? The policing. We've got police that seem to be tracking people for saying the wrong thing on social media, but then they're not really concentrating on cases like this.
Well, they were there in 10 minutes.
We also say
they've taken loads of forensics.
Yeah, okay. So there's a 999 call. Are they going to come to something else with a 999 call? But I mean, the point is, for example, we had the BBC were covering it amazingly. Was the Lloyd's Bank Business Support Unit destroying companies here, and they're actually police detectives working for the company and with the company. And so it took a new police crime commissioner coming along, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago, and Lloyd's Bank moved out the city immediately, because all I'm saying is that there is always suspicions of police corruption, police taking two salaries, one from the gangsters and the criminals, and this does indicate that the police have not been, concentrating on possible violent crime going on or responding to it properly. But anyway, we'll see how they get on. The other story...
So perhaps there is an argument for robot police dogs, but who's programming? We need open source, and
I think you just need more
blockchain.
Actual detectives who are doing detective work rather than people who are tick box police.
But what's happened in
real human beings out there trying to find criminals?
What's just happened is in Old Market is when they had the last Labour government, they built a state-of-the-art police station, Trinity Road Police Station there, state-of-the-art, in the right in the centre of the community, a place where people could walk in. Then, when the Tories came after 2008, they decided they were going to have an austerity budget, so they cut the police's budget. They sacked 20,000 officers, and they said we can't afford to keep this police station. Now it was then left empty for quite a while, and of course because it's a police station, it's got no windows, so you can't just turn it into flats. And so it has now been completely levelled now. So we built this state-of-the-art police station, and now we've just demolished it because they don't know what to do with it, because they haven't got the police officers to put in it, and they're going to build luxury flats on what used to be a state-of-the-art police station.
Just the latest on this, the crime... apparently this guy may have been recognised by the police because they're concentrating now in West London. They believe that he brought these suitcases from London, travelled from London to Bristol with the suitcases found on Clifton Suspension Bridge on the early hours of the Thursday, July the 11th, were believed to contain the bodies of 2 adult men. And so the police are out in West London looking for, I guess, this guy. So anyway, that's one bizarre story, but... what about the yesterday's big story about water and the water industry? I don't know if you've been following that one as well, Matt. You obviously, you're not one of the mainstream media types, which is absolutely fine.
That's right.
So the water industry is now saying that there's going to be big increases in bills, but the water companies themselves, in this standoff with Ofwat, the so-called regulator, they're saying, actually, these increases in the bills are not going to be enough.
Yeah, because, basically, the Thames Water is bankrupt. It should never... this is classic sort of Thatcherite nonsense, but all of these utility infrastructures were privatised, and it's just...
And as Fergal Sharkey is saying, that all of these billions, these tens and tens of billions of pounds have been sucked out of the industry... by the shareholders of these private businesses.
And they're paying dividends out to the shareholders, even though they're under investigation for, basically throwing sewage in the water. Incidentally,
are they really under investigation? I think they just do it with impunity.
I think they do it with impunity. But the citizen investigators who are looking into it all, because they measure, it's
so
quite
there
clear
was a
what
chance with this Labour government. They're talking about railway nationalisation, aren't they? Renationalisation. There was a chance, surely, that this Labour government could have said, right, this is so bad that we're now going to bring the water companies back into public ownership and start to deliver water at cost. No, what's happening instead is that private we're talking here about private equity mainly, these massive pension fund managers are saying, we're going to refinance these companies, and we will only allow this refinancing of these companies if they up the bills. Yeah. And that's what's happening. Well, so we could have had a government that was intervening here to stop this water dumping and stop the fleecing and the racket all around the country of water by these private businesses. But no, this wonderful new Labour government...
mandate.
with their wonderful mandate. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the water
companies doing nothing.
Yeah, well, what they do, the whole talk about renationalising the rails, it was a kind of sop to keep us all.
Well, they may actually do it because several of the rail companies are actually now in public.
Well, that's right. Because
I think is it south
as the franchises run out, they can just take them back in house. They could always have done that. In any case, they didn't do it. I mean, during the years of the Blair government, they could have done it, but
so why aren't they doing it with water, Martin? These aren't really Labour, but these aren't really Labour people at all, are they? They're just working for private equity.
Yes, I know, but I don't think there's much point in spending taxpayers' money on renationalising them. You should just let them go bankrupt. Yeah, let them take the loss, and then we'll take it over when it's gone bankrupt. Because we don't want to spend any money on this. Why should we give the shareholders any more money to take over the company? You know, we should just make them lose money. And then we take over all the assets for nothing. But they may be forced to do that as we go into a major economic crisis.
Well, our MP, Carla
Denyer,
our wonderful new Green MP, writing in the Metro today. I'm not sure if she's got any power. Has she got any power? Well, was she just a talking shop type person? Private water companies need to tap out, she says. It's time to nationalise. This is in tomorrow's Metro. It's just been published on their website. It's deplorable. If private water companies get their way, your bill could be rising by 44%. All while they're still paying their shareholders dividends. That would mean an extra 183 out of your pocket over the next 5 years. Regulator Ofwat stepped in and said it wants firms to limit rises for households to £19 a year, which is 21% until 2030. Hang on, 21% increase in water fees. Look, this is fueling inflation, isn't it? And actually, what we're doing is we're by our inability to regulate these industries or to keep them in public ownership, we're stabbing ourselves in the back. What we're doing is we're upping the cost of living crisis, making it worse.
Well, that's right. And as I say, what may happen is they're going to inherit a massive geopolitical crisis. You know, if we're going to go to war with Lebanon, there's going to be a big row about that. And the other thing is that there's going to be
they dare.
Well, I mean, what's happening in the Red Sea? Oh, it's the Israelis who are going to decide. Yeah. They're going to decide.
Do you really think they're going to go to war with these people? Or it may be just a scaremongering, saber rattling.
Well, you don't presume so. Is all I will say about that.
Fair enough. No,
and of course, in the Red Sea, if the Houthis, if it really kicks off, there's going to be things like the oil prices are going to go through the roof. There's going to be a stock market crash, and of course, the Americans blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline over a year ago.
What?
Yeah, but I mean, that is actually stabbing the whole, basically trashing the whole European economy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was living in Berlin, and the prices were going up like 8 times the energy bills, and people just didn't. It's like, do you realize why? It's you would have got cheap gas
evil Putin
from Russia.
The evil Putin. That's why. I mean,
Martin
bombed his own pipeline. If people really knew what was going on, pay attention, bless all of you listening to this, podcast, station, good on you, because it's incumbent on us to find truthful information, and bless people like Declassified UK. But if people really knew, who was causing all the problems in the world, we could solve them, imagine the fact that they think they can pull that one over us, that Putin blew up his own pipeline, and I loved what Putin said in the news conference about that, just totally deadpan. They say that I blew up our pipeline, but if I wanted to stop it, I would just go down and turn it off. It's just ridiculous.
He didn't need to, did he really? No.
I mean, they stood to make trillions of dollars from it. It would seem a little bit like shooting yourself in the foot. But yeah, it's not hard to find the truth of all this stuff. It's just that our media, mainstream, no, I don't even want to give them that credit. They're not mainstream anymore. When you've got someone like Joe Rogan, rates higher than CNN and Fox, they're the legacy media. They don't seem to want to report on the truth.
Yeah, I do find it rather amusing when you see some BBC person tweeting and it's like, no retweets, nothing. This is supposed to be, your finger's supposed to be on the pulse, man.
Yeah, right.
But nothing at all.
It's true, isn't it?
Okay, so Keir Starmer's Labour Party has been boosted by £20 million from just 11 donors. This is who they are. And this is a great little article in the Daily Express, which has suddenly become a great newspaper of great favour because they're an opposition to the present government. I mean, even though it's owned by the same people as the Daily Mirror, which is the pro-Labour side. This is how it works, folks. So you've got the Express pro-Tory, the Mirror pro-Labour, but both owned by Reach plc. We have taken a look at the 11 donors who have boosted the Labour Party. So there's a whole list here. But I mean, the point is you've got Lord David Sainsbury, 7.6 million. The Union of Shop Distributive and Allied Workers, 4.6 million. Crikey, I didn't know they had that much money. Ecotricity, based in Stroud. This is Dale Vince's company, which just sells you electricity, but takes a little bit extra off of it, saying it's going towards some sort of renewable thing, which it probably is. But they really don't generate electricity. They just take a little bit of money off your bill. Anyway, he's got 3.3 million quid sloshing around. He's decided to give to the Labour Party, not the Greens, because apparently the Greens don't take money from these sorts of corporates. Anyway, they've got a whole list here, but this is becoming just another Tory party, isn't it?
Well, no. What's happening is
these big corporate donors,
the business classes, and the City of London. There's a very good article about Rachel Reeves's relationship to the City of London. They're going to bring in loads of private finance initiatives. In other words, they're not going to spend money.
Well, Labour invented it.
Well, that's right. And so they're going to, instead of investing public money in infrastructure, which is what we need to do, they're going to go into partnership with private equity. They will build the stuff, and then they will own it and take a rent from it going into the indefinite future. It's economic idiocy, but they're doing it because they're in the pocket of the City of London. And this is how it works. The Tories are in power for ages and ages and ages because they can cling on and cling on and cling on. Then when you finally get them out, the people who come in are in the pockets of the same people that were funding the Tory party in the first place. And you can't get round this because you're forced to vote for the Labour Party to keep the other side out. So then that's what it does. It just locks everything down. And of course, what they did in New Zealand, they managed to break out of that, and they did it. But by instead of trying to change the leadership of the Labour Party, they changed the electoral system by knocking on everybody's door and having a referendum. And of course, they were able to do that because it's a smaller place. And also, it was just in the 1980s when that was going on, and the revolution in Labour politics in New Zealand. That was just when the All Blacks were teaching the Northern Hemisphere teams how to play rugby because they couldn't play rugby up to that point. They never worked out how to do it. And of course they were just faster and better. I remember a hooker from New Zealand dropping a goal from play. Absolutely unheard of previously that a forward would do something like that, but everybody's got to play every position. And of course, when they were doing that, I mean, New Zealand was a can-do country in the 1880s, the first one to give a women a vote, and the first ones to create a welfare state in the 1930s.
Yeah. That's right, first women vote by 50 years, I think it was.
Yeah, 50 years before. Because I know they were known as a liberal country, and then they became a Labour country. So in the 1930s, just as in Sweden, the Labour Party won the election, and they started building a welfare state, and people go, "You can't do that. You'll never be able to afford that."
Well, maybe we should all move. Right. Maybe we should all move to New Zealand, or maybe just adopt New Zealand policies.
I would argue
rail renationalisation.
Well, that's one of the things they did.
Proportional representation.
Roadgenomics.
Do you want to say something, please, Matt, about the PR system that did get adopted? Is it?
MMP, you get a...
What does it stand for?
Oh, gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
I'll look it up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably 12 when it came in. I remember the campaign and, catchy slogan, gotta be MMP. Anyway, there are other systems, so I wouldn't say it has to be MMP. Around Europe, you've got different proportional systems. I think the UK is quite unique in that it's still got this
it's called mixed member proportional representation.
Right. And so how that one works anyway, that's what I can speak to, is that you get a party vote and a local candidate vote. So that means, if you're kind of forced to choose between a local person that, you can do that, but you can still give a vote to the Greens. And then basically there is a number of seats for the local reps. So whoever gets in on that. But then there's a whole other bunch of seats. I can't tell you exactly what the proportion is, but they're assigned for the party the parties to be split up proportionally, then it's not that then there's this sort of government. You sort of brought up, would Farage's party have X many seats? Not necessarily, because the government is formed in terms of the government, the majority, that is then formed by a coalition if it needs to be. Sometimes you can still win outright, but usually what's happened is they need to form some sort of a coalition.
The point is, do you think it's working in New Zealand?
I think it's definitely an improvement, a huge improvement. It's not perfect, but it's a big improvement. Yes, I do. Because you get Labour, and then they have to make some concessions to the Greens, and it does work. It's not sort of this out of control, they come to terms of agreement before they come into power.
So maybe this is why all the oligarchs seem to come to London. This is a little bit easier to get their way.
And there's also more of a cap. The other part of it, I think, is crucial to having a real democracy. You need truth. You need a better electoral system, but you also need to take money out of the political campaigns. I'm very interested in what people's ideas about that are, but certainly capping donations. Bernie Sanders is a big advocate for publicly funded elections. So each party has a certain amount of finance and a campaign platform to use to spread their message. Various ways to do it that don't involve a slush fund, where it's just becoming, bribery. And it's just, you talk about, it's just a capitalist takeover of the state. So we've got to get the money out of politics somehow.
That seems to be a sensible way to do it, per vote or something. But one of the things that upsets me, I find it really, I think the whole idea is to just demoralise everyone so no one even bothers to vote, and probably most of them just leave the country anyway, is the way they keep recycling these failed politicians like David Cameron. Now we've got Ed Miliband is back. Yes, he's a wonderful MP, yes, and first thing he's done is he said, no, there will be no more, he's vetoed their own policy, the Labour Party policy, and said there's going to be no more licences given to drill any oil, and also is apparently going to be banning these petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles even quicker than he has to. So this is recorded just before the election. Here's Alan Miller from the Together Declaration talking about the plan to ban these fossil fuel vehicles quicker than they even have to.
We're talking about motorbikes and cars. There's 37 million car drivers in Britain and 1.5 million motorbikers. They all vote. And they're very concerned about the internal combustion engine bans, the idea that petrol and diesel cars and engines are going to be banned, electrification, without, again, proper scrutiny, right? Electrification. Where the cobalt, the copper, where does it come from? The mining, young children, the fact that you use furnaces and carbon to create these things, the whole situation of the weight of them setting on fire, breaking more things on the roads and car parks. What happens when you can't use them after a short period of time? The cost to replace them, where do they go? These are all discussions, right? We should have them, and electrification points and what that all means, right? Because all these buzzwords come out, but what's the reality of it? Carbon has enabled us to have wealth, right, across the world, to transform ourselves. What we need to do is think about the next 100 years, next 500 years, bold planning, innovation, investment, but have the public at the heart of it. That's the thing, right? Now, what was interesting today is that Nigel Farage came down. We asked all the candidates to come and speak to us and have an interview. Some couldn't make today or the Times, but hardly anyone responded. But he came down and he addressed the bikers and said his views on the net zero situation and on, shouldn't be banning these things. And I think it's really important that we do this up and down the country, that we get in front of candidates. We've got a Together pledge on net zero that insists on transparency. Every Democrat should sign it and go out, and we've got 5 pledges that we've asked all of our members and supporters to go to candidates with and put it to them about care, healthcare and the NHS as well, about free speech and debanking and platforming, about the Public Health Act, the WHO, key things about our situation, our privacy, our rights, our autonomy. So we'd encourage everyone to do that. It's not just about the election, though. Obviously, we campaign throughout the year, 360 approach, grassroots, local, regionally, nationally, and we encourage everyone to get involved in that project.
Yeah, so that's Alan Miller from the Together Declaration. You first on this, Matt. What do you make of this? There seems to be there's almost a consensus out there. I'm not sure if I dare to call it that, but the net zero policies are being we're just being told this is going to happen. There's no kind of discussion, very little discussion about the idea of getting rid of petrol and diesel cars. And the other thing is, you look across the world to China, well, they're not doing any of this. And we're on a planet which goes, the air goes round in the planet. And so what's the point of us doing this to ourselves? Almost like trying to stop ourselves developing. And maybe using nuclear. Maybe that's the idea. We've got to use lots of nuclear, which is megally expensive. So anyway, what do you make of the sort of points he's raising there about getting rid of petrol and diesel?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've got to do, and then what is the best way to do it? That's the question. I think it is clear that we cannot keep continuing to burn fossil fuels, and I don't personally like the argument Well, not obviously. It's not about absolute. It's just about how what's the best practice, isn't it, to move forward? Obviously, there needs to be a transition, and you need to mitigate the impact on people like commuters, with who already have those cars. How can we make this work? But we do need to do it.
Public transport.
Yeah,
there's nothing basically. I mean, last year they reduced the number of buses in Bristol by about something like 30%. So there's also parts of Bristol like Long Ashton that have no longer got bus services, or parts of Long Ashton anyway. What's the pips are squeaking in the world of public transport. In other words, these private companies are trying to get more and more profit out of the buses. So the bus that doesn't make enough money, just forget it. And the subsidies. Anyway, so what I'm saying is there doesn't seem to be any actual consideration of the public in any of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a common theme, isn't it? And it comes back to the slush fund system, the bribery system, and politicians coming in and privatizing. I mean, a Labour Party that's coming in and not nationalising. They're furthering privatisation. It's they've shifted more and more to the centre, to the point where they're on the right. I'd say centre right. And that just doesn't seem to work. It's just not efficient.
Look, okay, there's this whole business of diesel and petrol.
Yeah.
Diesel. I've just looked into this. There's a couple of good. There's a very good article on The Conversation. Fact check: are diesel cars really more polluting than petrol cars? Actually, it turns out no, they're not. And but there's a sort of. We were told 10 years ago by Ed Miliband, buy diesel cars because they're far less carbon comes out per mile of a diesel car, half roughly, than a petrol car. But now we're told, no, those particulates are coming out too, and they're really bad. But now, if you look in this article, it's an excellent compilation of the various research. They're saying there's almost exactly as much in the way of these particulates coming out of petrol cars as coming out of diesel cars. So seems to be a game being played here. Certainly, if you buy diesel, you're getting more energy out of diesel than you do out of petrol. It's just got more embodied energy in the fuel. So there's a bit of a game where the idea is, look, we're going to keep the prices of these things exactly the same. And in fact, the whole price of energy is being just upped and upped and upped. So that the new nuclear that's coming online starts to look like it's more affordable. So everything's expensive. Gas. And anyway, Martin, what do you make of all this? The net zero move towards having no petrol and diesel.
Well, I mean, it's aspirational, and you can see the Greens, for example, will be pushing for this sort of agenda. So they did reasonably well. If they had a proportional system, they'd have got 40 MPs. This is the sort of thing they'd be pushing for.
Sorry to interrupt you, but one of the interesting things I've just popped up here, I just clicked it, is the link in the RAC article and the Conversation one. You click on it and it says, this is where the government proves and shows that diesel only emits half the carbon per mile as petrol. You click on it and the government webpage says not found. So they've taken the webpage down.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's a game. They're playing games with us.
Yes, and so in other words, this is sort of aspirational. This sort of the sort of thing that middle class families who recycle, the sort of things they want or they think they want. They don't really haven't really thought. The other thing, as you mentioned, public why do we need new kinds of cars? Maybe we don't need any cars. We need mass transit, public transport.
And taxis.
And, yeah. That's right.
Cabs are public
so the idea,
transport.
what we're doing with the electric car boondoggle is we're going to carry on having the same old lifestyle where people commute 40 k's to work every day in a car.
How much did they just pay?
They're going to be electric
Tesla
cars.
have just paid off Elon Musk a massive amount, haven't they? They had a 20% drop in sales of Tesla cars, and Elon Musk has managed to do some sort of mega deal where he's taken a massive amount of money out of it. I think he's just decided, right, that's enough of that, let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Is he out?
No, he's still in, but he
Yeah.
took a massive deal. I'm not sure how many billion it was.
Yeah, but
massive. I'll look it up, but it was a colossal amount of money. So people like him, it seems to me like what they're involved in is they know what the next big thing is going to be. They invest in it. They make a fortune out of it. And then once it starts to sink, because it was rubbish in the first place, they're on to the next game.
Well, the other thing I've meant...
Is that too cynical, Matt?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know the details of that one.
Can I just say what the second point I wanted to make, which is that we talked earlier about the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's quite clear that energy pipelines and oil and gas are going to be fundamental to the conduct of World War III, as they were fundamental to the conduct of World War II. And of course, in that situation, if we're going to go to war with Russia and China, we can't negotiate with them about fixing the climate. It's just impossible, you know. We've got to change our attitude towards those things. And they're saying, well, we'd like to talk to you about that, but can you get your boot out of our face, please? And this is what we're dealing with. And of course, the blowing up of the Nord Stream, the Greens in Germany have accepted this whole, you know, the agenda of we've got to go to net zero, so they've got to close the nuclear power station. But they're also the ones banging the drum for we've got to go to war with Russia, which is very demoralising.
If they don't like nuclear, that's probably a bad idea. So they're
going to lose. I mean, the talk in the NATO conference this week about how they're going to go to war with Russia and all the rest of it.
We're going to do that after the break, Martin.
But I mean, I'm just pointing out that when we're talking about all this climate change stuff, there's going to be a big climate change when the nuclear bombs hit us going towards
nuclear
Christmas.
winter, maybe. Yeah.
That really will cause.
By the way,
problems.
Elon Musk took $56 billion out of Tesla. That is end of last month, and his net worth, by the way, is also down $11 billion because the rally of Tesla shares has ended. Basically, it's come to an end. All that. So when your sales in 1 year are down 20% and you're pushing loads of new models and etc. on the market, then you know, might as well walk away.
If people have got any money, they ain't going to buy new electric cars, are they?
But the point is the money's been sucked in by investors who think they're going to make loads of cash out of this over the last decade or so, and they have.
As long as you sell the shares at the right point,
it's
you're all right.
to leave, folks.
But what do you think, Tony? Do you think that electric is worse than fossil fuels?
Well, I think you should have a bit of a balance. Yes, I think it generally is. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those. Yeah, unless you've got. So, for example, trams running on electric, just for a car. I mean, if you look at the glum faces of the people at Severn Bridge Services waiting for their cars to charge up so they can get home, sitting around drinking coffee and hoping that they're going to get somewhere, and also the massive amount of mining that goes into building these things, and also, there's another thing which is the incredible replacement cost for a battery. The fact that we reported on this show, about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, that the resale values of these cars is plummeting, like after the first few months of buying them, because the quality of the actual miles you're even getting out of the cars are no good. No, I think they're a gimmick, basically.
Right.
Ultimately,
those are all fair points. But how do you feel about the global warming? Are do you believe in fossil fuel climate change?
I think we should have public transport. I think we should have trains.
Yeah.
I think we should have buses and trains and taxis, and we should get rid of this obsession with the car. In fact, one of my reports, my report is which I did about 5-6 years ago, well, maybe longer than that, for RT, was into Dr. Beeching and the relationship with the American oil companies and why they closed the railways in this country was because the Americans said, look, if you want to dig out some North Sea oil, you're going to depress the world oil price. And so the Americans said, well, we'll let you do the North Sea oil, we'll finance it and everything, give you the money for the oil rigs and the energy companies, but only if you open up a domestic market in oil. So that's when they started building motorways, they started shutting railways. We should have decent public transport. If we got decent public transport, you don't need any of this pollution everywhere. You get one train, a diesel puffing out smoke, whatever, I'm sure it's terrible, but you've got thousands of people on that train, and especially if it's at cost. Which of course it isn't now. £250 return from Bath to London, an open return. I mean, what a joke!
I totally agree. These sensible policies are much more efficient. You know, they say capitalism provides basis of competition, which makes things more efficient. No, it doesn't. Not if that's your only ruling philosophy. Cooperation and things that don't merely provide shareholders with maximum profit. That doesn't tend to create more efficient stuff. It's just clear. You've got your closures of these, water privatized companies as well. It just shows, we need certain things to be publicly owned and run sensibly, with public interest in mind. Some people think the government is corrupt and therefore we should move. I totally get it. They are, but we need to solve that problem rather than putting everything into the hands of corporations, which you have even less control over.
Correct.
So we do need to have some balance. Obviously there's a danger with putting all the power into a state, but there's a balance to be struck there. And
in a way, you're not. You see, if you're nationalising, what you do is you just let boards run everything, and those boards are open to the public, and they run it all at cost. Anyway, we're going to have a break now, and we'll have a quick